Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, I'm sitting down with Dr. Kwame Ohemeng. I call him my cousin. I call him my big brother. Kwame is a board-certified anesthesiologist who spends 2 decades making life and death decisions in operation rooms across New York, New Jersey. He's a fellow of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, serves on the board of trustee for Xavier High School, and currently works for Summit Health. We've known each other for over 20 years, and Kwame is somebody that I truly respect and admire. He's an amazing husband, father, and son. Kwame is loved by many because of his authenticity, his love for others, and just an all-around good human. Despite his accomplishments, Kwame has always felt the pull to do something meaningful back home for the diasporas. And so today we're talking about his journey, what he's working on now, and what's actually possible for diaspora professionals like us. And of course, we'll end with the bridge, where Kwame will leave a specific resource or opportunity for us to utilize. So let's get right into it. Kwame, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to spend some time with you and, hopefully drop some insights for, our fellows in the diaspora.
Absolutely. Why don't you take us back to the beginning where it all started? Where did you grow up? What was your thinking back then? What made you want to get into entrepreneurship or even become a doctor?
Born and raised in Harlem, but obviously with the roots in Ghana. Both my parents are from Ghana, and my mom came to the States to study in the early to mid 70s. Met my dad, and lo and behold, I came along. And in the early part of life, within that first year, my grandma took me to Ghana. So I spent the first year or so of my life in Ghana. So I learned to speak Twi fluently. So that was a blessing, and that was actually my first language at home. So I came back when I was just a little under 2. Always spoke Twi at home. Went on to learn English in school, in kindergarten. My mom often says that I would never speak English to her when I first came. She was so anxious to hear
Right.
how I spoke English, but she'd even ask me questions in English, and I'd answer in Twi. It was just natural to me, and I'm so thankful, to have that to have the language. Because I see my younger cousins who had were born here and really didn't spend any significant time in Ghana or time with my grandmother. They didn't really pick up the language, though they regret it as adults, and they wish that they could actually communicate and understand. They understand, being yelled at and little things in Twi, but in terms of full understanding, they don't have that. So it's a big privilege. Yeah. So I grew up in Harlem, in the 70s, and this is the middle of the crack epidemic and a lot of violence and all that stuff in that surrounding community. My mom felt it's very, very important for me to have discipline. I'm an only child, by the way, but she wanted me to have like that focus and discipline. So she felt that the best way to do that was to put me in Catholic school, which was a big struggle for her as a single parent. She sacrificed a lot to pay school tuition. So pretty much from first grade through high school, I was in Catholic school, Annunciation in Harlem, onto the prestigious Xavier High School. You mentioned I'm on the board of trustees there now. I went on to Xavier, where I went to high school, and then went on to Wesleyan University in Connecticut. I graduated in BA with a BA in English before going on to medical school. I always knew I wanted to be a doctor, from a very young age. I was one of those kids that when they asked, "Hey, what do you want to do?" I want to be a doctor. And I think that came from my uncle, my mom's twin brother, Uncle Kwejo, was a physician, or is a physician, retired physician now. And I always looked up to him. And I remember I would, peek at his journals and take a look at stuff. Didn't understand what was in there, but I thought it was fascinating. The pictures and things that I thought were really cool. And I was always someone who was tinkering as a kid. I always wanted to know how things worked. So oftentimes that meant breaking toys, trying to figure out the inner workings. So, so I guess I could have been an engineer as well, but medicine is what really, really drew me in. Or I was really drawn to medicine. It's one thing to say you want to be a doctor, which is, and parents, my son wants to be a doctor, be a lawyer, all these, careers that, African parents in particular, it's push their kids to go into, but it's another thing to really go through the process, and do it. And I think I recognized early on, I need to make sure this is something I really want to do.
Right. Now, did you say your uncle influenced you to want to become a doctor?
Yeah,
Okay.
because he was a doctor.
Gotcha.
I looked up to him. He never said, "Oh,
Gotcha.
you should be a doctor like me." But there's a funny story. I think we went up to visit him. He was in Buffalo when I was little. That's where he went to medical school. And there was a study session. I don't remember this, but I heard the story many times. They were studying, you know, and they were talking about one professor that they liked, and they said, I really liked him. I said, "Oh, me too. I like him a lot." So he started calling me too,
Oh,
at that age, because I was only 3. I had no idea what a doctor did, what a doctor was really, right? It's not till you actually experience it and get into whether it be in a clinic setting or the hospital setting for you to really know. I just knew the person. I knew that I loved my uncle, and I looked up to him, I admired him, and somebody I wanted to be like. But I didn't know, right? And so in high school, I fortunately at Xavier that during our junior year they have senior service, where 1 day a week during the second half of our junior year, we had an opportunity to do volunteer work somewhere, and I chose to volunteer at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in Washington Heights on 168th Street. So I volunteered in the ER there, and pretty much every Monday I was in the ER. You know, seeing all the craziness that goes on in the ER. I was, transporting patients to various areas. I was running labs and blood work to various parts of the hospital. And I loved it. I said, wow, I couldn't see myself doing anything else. I wanted to really solidify it for me that this is, it didn't creep me out being in the hospital. I was engrossed out by the blood and all the stuff that was going on. I really said, wow, this is what I didn't necessarily want to be an ER doctor, but I knew that this is what I wanted to do.
right.
So that was very, very helpful for me. And it really, set me on a course to go into medicine. In fact, when I was writing my medical school essays, I talked about the experience that I had in the ER. The competition is one of the things I talked about as to my motivation for going into medicine. In college, I also did a program. At that time, it was called 3000 by 2000. It was an initiative by the American Medical Association to bring more people of color into the healthcare industry. So it was great in terms of summer research opportunities and mentoring. So pretty much every summer was busy for me during college doing this program. They had prep for the MCAT. All those things were built into that program. I really credit that with helping me to get into medical school. A wonderful program. Professor Donny was one of my mentors there, a biology professor at Wesleyan, who really helped you know direct me and push me into the career in medicine that I chose. So ultimately, I went to SUNY Downstate in in Brooklyn and started there. So I graduated college in 2000. I took a year off and did research at a hospital in Queens. It was a psych hospital, actually, Holliswood Hospital in Queens. So I did clinical research there. A wonderful experience. Though psych didn't really draw me in as a career, but I really enjoyed working with the patients. And a lot of them were people of color. And young people who had horrible, illnesses, psychiatric illnesses, from schizophrenia to what have you, to severe depression and anxiety and various conditions that it was really 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 sad in a lot of ways, a lot of their lives. But I was just happy to be there to help them, to give a familiar face to and also the research side. Obviously, there were new drugs. Some of them are now on the market now, but they were in phase 4 clinical trials at that time. So these are obviously the sickest of the sick. If they needed to be in an inpatient hospital setting, then they had to have very severe illnesses at that point. Yeah, it was something, but it was good to be there. And my boss was actually was a alumnus of Wesleyan University in class of '95,
Okay.
Sabrina Prince. So it was a nice connection there. I didn't know her at Wesleyan. She graduated before I started, but it was great, a great friendship, and another great mentor and a big help to me along the road to medical school. So that was that first year. Went on to SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn, a wonderful institution, where I learned a lot. You mentioned I'm an anesthesiologist now, but I didn't know that I wanted to go into anesthesia at all at that point. I thought when I coming in, I thought I wanted to be a family medicine doctor, but which is very interesting because again, I talked about saying you want to be a doctor, not really knowing what doctors do. So once I did some time, I did my rotation through the family medicine clinic. I said, well, I do not want to do this. I did not like the clinic at all. I despise just sitting in the clinic and talking all day. I of course loved helping patients, but that did not excite. I found it a little bit boring. It's certainly something that needs to be done. It's very necessary, but it didn't excite me. The next thing that caught my attention was obstetrics. I thought I wanted to be an OB/GYN, because I thought it really combined everything. So it allowed you to have the primary care aspect of working with patients over a long period of time, having a continuity of care, and then the operating room. So whether it be C-sections or doing deliveries, I thought it was something that kind of combined all the things that I was kind of interested in. However, at least at the time, a lot of the doctors that I shadowed didn't seem happy. They really didn't. I guess work-life balance was not something that was evident, and to the point where somebody's like, "Why do you want to do this?" Looked at me, and I said, "Okay, well, maybe I don't want to. Maybe I don't want to do this." At that point, I had not done my anesthesia rotation yet, this is coming to the end of my third year in medical school. So I did my anesthesia rotation. I absolutely loved it. The people were happy. There was good work-life balance. They're like, "Oh, you should consider this. This is something that, this might be something you might be interested in." I liked the procedures. I thought it was really, really fascinating. And there's a lot that's unknown with the anesthesia, how exactly, how anesthesia works. I loved physiology and pharmacology and the seeing, you know, how things work real time. And whereas if you go see your doctor, your primary care doctor, they may send you home with, medications. They come back in 3 months, let me know how you're doing. But whereas in the operating room, someone's blood pressure is out of whack, the sugar's out of you're giving medicine through the IV directly. Anesthesiologists are the only doctors who actually administer medications. Otherwise you prescribe, the nurse will give it, even in the hospital setting. We are actually drawing up and pushing the medications ourselves. So, and you're seeing real time within seconds, someone's blood pressures will maybe like 190, or you can get it rapidly down to the 160s, 140s, down to almost normal during the time when they're undergoing surgical stress, which can increase your blood pressure, heart rate, and can change various things. So now you're able to administer medications. So it's almost like flying a plane when you think about anesthesia, right? Your job is to kind of maintain homeostasis. You're trying to maintain balance and keep that plane level. Even with all this stuff, all this turbulence, all these things are going on. You want to try to keep the patient as smooth as possible, and bring them out safely. Most people are terrified under anesthesia. They think it's, like they always wonder. The question I always get, like, "Oh, am I going to wake up again?" You know?
Do you get nervous still or no?
Oh yeah, even 17 years later, their days. Yeah, yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, there's routine, but I think I've learned in my time, like, you don't never get too cocky, because there'll always be a patient that'll surprise you and shake you and make you realize you're human, in all of this, So there are instances, but you never show that. It's almost like being a duck, right? You're pedaling like crazy under the water, but you should be chill. Like, I think in the OR, if the anesthesiologist is panicking, there's it's a problem.
Problem.
So you should be chill, and then you can change your pants later. If you're stressed out, you have to be focused and really do the problem solving, figure out what's going on real time, and ultimately, this is someone's life in your hands. It's how
Yeah.
I look at somebody's mom, dad, brother, sister, someone who's coming in to get better, right? So you don't want to make the situation worse. You really want to care for that patient as if they were your own family member and bring them through. So that's kind of how I look at each patient, and I try to convey that. When I talk to them, that even the most nervous patient, I try to tell them that I'm going to be there with you. I'm not going to leave your side. I'm going to be there with you the whole time. I'm going to bring you through this, and get you through safely at the end. And I think that reassurance is something that I find. That's part of what I like about what I do. Being able to reassure patients in a short period of time. You don't have a lot of time, but you really have to a good rapport, with the patients, so they can trust you essentially with their lives. Even if it's the most minor procedure, it could be your pinky toe, and it's still important, right? It's still scary, no matter what you're having, colonoscopies, all that stuff. Routine to us, but it's not routine to them, right? So you know, so that's how it
So
goes.
so years later, how do you feel about it though? Do you feel like it's still, work-life balance? Do you
Yeah,
feel in love with what you do?
I absolutely love what I do. I love it a little bit more now because I don't work in the hospital setting anymore. For the first maybe 14 years of my career, I was in the
Right.
operating room and level one trauma centers. Very very busy. Overall, sleeping in the hospital is not fun overall. I realized like what I was missing, like not being able to be home every night, to have dinner with the kids, and sleep in my own bed is a big difference. So I started my new job at Summit Health in the summer of 25. I'm sorry, summer of 24 is when I started at Summit Health. So this is a ambulatory surgery center. So it's all same day procedures. So whatever you can have and go home. Like we even do knee replacements and whatnot, same day, hip replacements, same day, shoulder surgeries, gallbladders, various procedures. As long as you can go, lots of colonoscopies, lots of endoscopies, pretty much anything that you could go home the same day with, we cover. Um, so, so it still provides a challenge. I still get to take care of patients, but now I have a better work-life balance in that no matter how horrible the day is, I know that I'm coming back home at the end of the day. I'm not sleeping in the hospital.
When did you start thinking about entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I have. I think for me initially, like what I've focused on um, before going into entrepreneurship was really investing in the stock market. Really, here is what my focus has been on. I mean, that's like maybe a piece of advice that I would pass on in diaspora is like you really need to focus on, to start at least, is if you're fortunate to have a job where the employer matches your 401k contributions, it's foolish to not participate, to not put that money up, because it's like it's leaving money on the table if you don't invest in your 401k, and it also reduces your taxable income. So that's really what my focus had been on, from when I started. I think it started in practice in 2009 and consistently always maxed out my
Right.
401k, each with each year, and in addition to that, my focus has been on investing in like low cost funds, like for example, BT Sachs is one, which is the Vanguard Total Stock Market account. So yeah, so I'd focused on investing consistently,
Right.
you know, in that area. In addition to, obviously, home ownership is also another big investment, but really investing consistently, low cost funds, um, and avoiding those who would. And you find a lot of people try to market to physicians, and because they see the salary, and they're like chomping at the bit, like, hey, so why don't you invest in this, or why don't you do this? Or those who, like, insurance is another thing. People who pose as insurance salesmen, but they're really trying to sell you a product, like
Right.
whole life insurance, all those things, which I'm very much against. Some people think it's great. I don't, just because of the costs involved. Because if you just take that money and invest it in a low income fund,
Right.
and it's overall over the years you come out doing better. You're not buying somebody a boat essentially in fees that they're collecting off of you. Even a minimal accounts under management fee of 1% over 20 or 30 years can be a significant amount of money that you're leaving on the table for someone else. It's not hard to do. I think on your own, um, you can do a very simple, 60% U.S., maybe 30% international. Some people do 10%. bonds. Um, Bonds haven't done great over the last couple of years. So, you know, you can kind of split that and leave a little play money for yourself, maybe 5% or so
Right.
of play money to kind of invest. There's always things that sound sexy, the Nvidias and all the, oracles and the names that pop up here and there in the news. So it's always interesting. And I think it's human nature to have the FOMO, and say,
Right.
oh, look, but it's gambling. I mean, I think putting money in individual stocks is
Right.
essentially gambling.
We talk a lot about investing in opportunities. Let me talk about a different kind of investment for a second. Your health is your highest return on investment. That's why I created a brand called Bow Action. We make Vestly Pro adjustable weighted vest, currently on Amazon. The vest adds up to 35 pounds to your body weight, including wrist and ankle weights. If you're serious about investing in your health and not just your portfolio, and you want to support this channel and what we're building, please check out the link in the description below. Every purchase goes directly into keeping these conversations going. Thank you very much for your support. So you'll say that's the first time your entrepreneurship juices started running as far as investing in stocks with your company, with the jobs you're working with, investing in your 401k plan. When did you start thinking about Africa, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's more been in the last, last few years. I would say maybe in the last 5 years is now I'm pretty comfortable with my portfolio here. So there's always been that thought like, well, what can we do back home, and how can we, not just build wealth but also help, and jobs and employ, others back home. I know my mom has a property in Ghana, in Domia Brania, Kaswa. So I decided to step in. She'd been working on this development, this project for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. My first instinct wasn't to join in because I felt that perhaps investing here could give you a better return on your investment. And not being there, I think, is a challenge, not having your feet on the ground to be able to observe. 'Cause, I think in the past, you hear stories of like family members kind of squandering people's funds. There's that African parent's dream, right? That they always want to have a home in Ghana.
Of
But
course.
right, but in the end, like oftentimes they're here. So how much time do they spend in Ghana? So it ends up being family members who are living in this house and essentially looking over the house for you, and they're kind of reaping the benefits, and you're there for a week or two on
Right.
vacation,
Right.
and you're back on the ground here. So why not invest where you are? So it didn't draw me in, but I saw that again, some of the pitfalls and the mistakes and the family members not doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And so, I stepped in, and started working on trying to finish up this project and help her along. I mean, it's ultimately, I'm my only child. It's going to benefit me and my family eventually, right? And
Right.
from
Right.
obviously go there and live there and all these things. So I felt it was important to step in. Yes, I did, and I've shifted things around quite significantly in terms of developing the landscaping. I brought in a landscape designer to model out what the land in the project should look like. And we've had some success there, and also talking with other people who've sourced items from China. Alibaba, for example, has been a good source of for finding some items, as well as partnering with artisans in Ghana for furniture and things that can be made there, and which obviously benefits those there as well. And certain electrical devices and things that are imported using Alibaba kind of avoids a lot of the. I guess you can save on some of the costs. I guess because a lot of duties that get put on things that are being sold in Ghana and brought in from other places. It's such a cutting out the middleman essentially in doing it. I found working with a cousin of mine. I found I guess a transporter or a shipping service that has a base in Ghana. So whatever things I buy through Alibaba, they handle the shipping, and they have a facility, a warehouse in Ghana. I think it's in Kaneshi is where their factory is, to receive, or the warehouse to receive all the materials, and then have a person who I've hired in Ghana who will pick up the things and bring them to the house. At the same time, I have a cousin who is also doing something very similar. With her mom's property, which is in Adenta. And they've had a lot of progress, and ultimately want to turn that into an Airbnb guest house kind of situation. They divided their property up into smaller apartments, you know. So again, she's been working on that process, and we together with all the things that we've learned, we've been we're starting a company actually, to help diasporans, build in Ghana. The name of our company is called Remote Build Ghana (RBG). So this is something that we're still in the very early stages of developing, but we because of all the challenges our parents have had and we had in the process, we've been able to kind of compile a list of trusted artisans and architects and and suppliers in Ghana. So we have this, as well as those who directly look over like the property managers essentially. So we have a team that we've assembled, which would allow us to now bring the service to others. So it's still in the early stages of development, in terms of getting our LLC in place and things fully established. I think on a future visit, we'll talk more in depth about that, and maybe bring my cousin on as well, so that we can share more information as to what our process is, in terms of helping others. But I think we intend to launch probably within the next 2 or 3 months to officially get it launched off the ground. So we're excited about it, and I think that it's going to be something that can help a lot of people in our position, like us, the two of us, where we have parents who have our own properties in Ghana, and and things may have not gone so well, and really needing someone who's going to be accountable, and trusted, who can deliver, because we work hard for our money right here, and sometimes it's not really appreciated. So we'll appreciate that there's plenty of money here, right? So it's not appreciated that that there's a struggle and there's a lot of sacrifice, to, to get those, to get that money, and a lot of sacrifice, and not just financial sacrifice, but just the time, right? The time that you could be spending with your family, that's spent in the, in the business world, or commuting, or in the hospital in my case, you know, it's painful to then somehow see that money is not doing what it should be doing, and or bringing a good return, right? I'm not. I love charity, and I give very generously, but it's not. There's time for charity, and there's time to
Absolutely.
expect a return on your investment. You just don't want to put that money away. And cousin Sarah, it's her brainchild starting out, and then she came to me and said, "Hey, you've had these experiences as well. So is this something you'd like to do?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I absolutely would love to join in this process." And and again, we already had people who were working in Ghana for us, who were working on site, our individual locations, and these other artisans that we brought in to create and to make things for us, so we know who we liked, who we didn't like, who was trustworthy, who wasn't trustworthy, who who played games and who didn't play games. I mean, it's very funny in Ghana. Oftentimes, I don't know. I feel like you'd hear so many stories. Oh, my aunt died in such and
Oh
such,
yeah,
and
of course.
I went to the funeral, and then I mean, how many family members do you have that
A
can
lot,
die
a
in
lot.
the course of
I know. My
a
child
month?
is same.
It's painful. So those who would just disappear, and then and not finish the job, and just have a million sob stories, and at some point, it just becomes, yeah, it's a lot. So again, we've had that opportunity. So, and we already had these people on the ground that we trust, and we've worked with, and we believe could actually be really, really helpful. So she found some of her own individuals doing searches and putting out um, through LinkedIn in Ghana, and and had hired some individuals, and I hired someone even through that search process as well. So yes, at this point, we have a team that's there, that's worked with us directly, that we trust, and so we have enough in place that we can now expand, and really help other people. So at this point, you have probably about direct reports, maybe about 10, but overall, if you look at all the artisans and the people we've used, probably about 20, 25 people would be plumbers and carpenters, that are really skilled, at what they do.
How are you finding these people not being boots on the ground, not living in Ghana? Or your cousin live in Ghana?
No,
Oh,
she's here,
wow.
but but over the last year, um, she spent almost a year in Ghana, working on that on her project there. So at that point, she was able to meet with people directly on her site, to go to my site as well, and to really build connections there in that time period. And so over that period of time, we've been able to put this together, and kind of a brain trust, essentially,
Right.
of getting all these people together. So I think it could really be quite helpful
Yeah.
for those here who are trying to get stuff done in Ghana, sight unseen, right? And,
Right.
and not, and a lot of times with our busy schedules, it's really very challenging to, you can't just drop everything and do a quick trip to Ghana. I went to Ghana actually in just after Thanksgiving this past year, the first week of December, just to make sure some things were in place at home, because we all intend to go this summer. We're going in August.
So let me ask you another question. Is it easier for you? Are you noticing that it's easier to have a business partner to work with like doing it versus doing it yourself? Because for me, I've always tried to do stuff by myself, try to find people to do it with, but it's hard to find people I could trust and want to go into business with. Now, in this scenario, you're going in with your cousin. Are you concerned about, any issues happening with business and family ties and, you worried about that or
No, yeah, well, you always have to be, because family is. Well, they say they sometimes don't do business with family. Some people say, right, but this is someone I grew up with.
Right,
It's like basically my sister.
right,
So so I think that I can trust her, and we're setting up the business in such a way, a partnership essentially, right? So again, there's trust. Like it's like the Russians say, trust but verify, right? So you see, you have to. So yes, you can't do anything without a certain level of trust, but it's important to and build. That's why we're not rushing to the launch, right? So we're kind of getting everything in place and getting our partnership agreement and documents uh, together, so that things are done properly. And even some of our partners in Ghana who will ultimately allow into the partnership, you know, um, it's not right from the beginning, right? We're not going to immediately bring on them. We've worked with them for some time. I think you discussed that there should be maybe 3 years to full partnership, something along those lines, so that we can see the level of commitment, that they have to the project, and how much they're willing to work. We don't plan to take a salary, in the early days, but
right.
those who work for us and who will be working directly with clients, they should have a salary, right? Leading up to it, but then at some point, when they're full partners, you know, then now you're looking at profit sharing as opposed to a payment model, or a salary per se. But
Yeah,
I think, yeah, I think you raise a very good point. I think that you have to make sure that that you have people who are all on the same page and have the same level of commitment.
right.
You know, and
Um,
there's always risk, right? There's a certain amount of risk involved with starting any business, whether it be loss of your capital or loss of your time and all this. So we're very cognizant of that. We're working to make sure that everything is properly in place and
in
the proper
place.
protections are in place. When you look at an LLC, in fact, we're yeah, like where you incorporate is important. What state you incorporate with, what laws are on your side. How's the tax structure gonna work out? When you're establishing a business in Ghana. So this is awesome.
Did you guys have to open up a company in Ghana in order to like an LLC in Ghana in order to start this company?
Not yet. I think that ultimately, I think the plan is we've established the company here, actually in Delaware is where we chose to incorporate, or start the LLC. So the Ghana-based company will be owned by the U.S.-based LLC.
Got it.
So the Ghana-based holding company will be owned by
Got it.
LLC here.
So far, what has surprised you the most about this process you started?
Well, I don't know if there's anything I could say that's been surprising. I'm pleased by the level of enthusiasm. So maybe that is a little surprising. By the few that we've shared, um, you know, information about what we're doing have been very excited. Like, oh, I would love to use your we're in the same boat in terms of trying to build and struggling and not getting exactly what we want. So could you guys help us? Is what we're that's what we're getting. And we haven't even like talked about it. Why? But already 4 or 5 potential customers are kind of waiting in the wings. Who would love to use the service, to help kind of bring their projects to completion. And again, you look at, like I talked about investment initially, right? So you look at the U.S. stock market, right? Even with all the ups and downs, with the changes in the current administration, if you look at the S&P, over the last 10 years, about 15%, right? So it's hard to justify like putting money in somewhere where you're not seeing any return yet, right? When you could have just put your money under your mattress, right? It's not going to grow, whereas you can very, very easily, very simply put your money in the stock market. And even with all the bumps, so again, like, they say, like, it's not real until you sell, right? so, but again, if you have a long window, of time, you just let it ride. You just let it go. So, imagine if you got 2008, you got scared, pull all your money out, then you wouldn't have experienced, within 18 months, it was back and even higher, right? So when tariffs
Right.
went into place, right? We're in 26, so let's say 24 when the tariffs were first announced. It seemed like it was the end of the world. Everything was, was down, right? So you panic and say, "Oh, let me sell," and no, then you're buying your loss, right? There's trust and there's kind of like confidence that that over the course of time, you ultimately more likely than not. They say, like, past success does not predict future, you know, yeah, every investment company will tell you that. But overall, if you look over time, consistently, there've been dips, but recoveries as well, right? Even if it's a long dip, there's still a point where, there's a recovery. So it's important to, and again, you diversify your investments. You don't put all your eggs in one basket, you know, and overall, I think you'll do just fine. So that's just on the investment side. But in Ghana, we want to make sure that now, if we're investing there, that we're going to get something, something out of this process. It's going to be a benefit to our families and not just our families in Ghana.
You're saying you're launching in a couple of months. What does that look? Is it the first building going up and you launch it, or how does it launch?
Well, I think it'll be bringing these projects to completion, essentially. So these are projects that are in progress, so not necessarily starting from scratch. I don't think we're not at that stage yet where we have a customer who has like a piece of land who they want to start developing on. Maybe that'll come. Maybe once we fully launch it, there will be individuals that are ready to go that route, and that'd be fine. That'd be great. That'd be a great test, right? To good test run to see how this process goes. But I think at this point we're trying to complete projects that are existing, even existing projects that we talked a little bit about, even like helping people get existing projects up and running in terms of VRBO and Airbnb type situations, so they can rent their properties that just sitting there just gathering dust,
Right.
and get people in there and then start getting some income.
You're not building homes for people. You're actually going to people who have land and then trying to see if they want to build on it for.
No, it could be. It depends on what they want to do with it, right? So it could be anything. It could be either, right? It could be an existing project, which is what we're looking at now, because we have a few customers who have projects that are are various stages of completion that they want to finish. Yeah. So and we don't have any clients yet that are have land, but again, we would address both. Whatever you have, or whatever stage you're in terms of your project, we'd be available to help. And so I guess it would start with a consult, right? The patient is what's in my head. The patient, the client would come to us and let us know where are we?
Right.
What is the stage? So we have people at every level, even at the point of the lands department. making sure that your land is unencumbered and doesn't have any issues. Because again, Ghana, that can be, it can be a little strange with a chief, the land that's owned by the stool or land that's owned by the government, and all those things that are in place. So you want to make sure that if you need someone to come do a search, right, and make sure that what the piece of property you bought is really your piece of property, hasn't been sold to various other individuals, and so there's no conflict when you go to start building. There's no conflict. So we have those in lands who are at that stage. We have the an architect, and we have those who can be project managers who can help oversee what's going on. An individual may even already have like a contractor, right, on site. And new contractors are funny. Like both, I joke and say it's like universal language, where they rob Peter to pay Paul, and everywhere, here or abroad. It's even worse when it's abroad. But they take on so many different jobs, and then you know, they don't show up for a while because there's someone else finishing somebody else's job because they're under pressure there, and you're trying to get them to come back because you have time and deadlines. So you need someone and you can't be on the phone all the time. On WhatsApp. Here, you're at work, you're busy. You can't be chasing people around. So our people there would be the ones with the eyes and ears. They'd be the ones on site coming to do site visits and make sure that you said you wanted your stair to loop around, this way, and it's looping the other way. So you want someone who's right there to say, hey, this is not what the client said they wanted. Let's do this the right way, or someone who's like taking videos and pictures of what's going on site and letting you, the individual here, know what's going on and how can we address the situation. So that's essentially what RPG will be. It will be your eyes and ears on site to kind of remove some of the headache and stress of building sight unseen.
Try to create something where the diasporas could see it being feasible for them to do themselves or possible, right? Because I think sometimes when we sit here, we just imagine all these opportunities that we could get into or want to get into, and sometimes we don't know the how or the who or the what. So I'm just trying to find a way to bring light to that so we can start getting real deep down information about how to connect back to Africa and how to invest. So
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, that's why I'm so proud of you in this and in what you're doing with the podcast. I think that there's a lot of us here, and we all have the same struggles, and that. So sometimes you need information. That time is different. It seems over there. It's not. No one's in a rush to get stuff done. So you have to kind of change your mindset when you work with, or have someone on the inside who can maybe navigate things for you or pay the right people to make things move a little bit faster. Because if you just go on a regular speed, you just sometimes end up frustrated.
Kwame, thank you so much. I think we're getting towards the end, but before we end, I want to kind of get into some kind of rapid fire questions. Biggest win?
Biggest win? Oh, wow. Oh, biggest one was probably buying my first place in Brooklyn. I bought a condo in Brooklyn.
I remember that condo, yeah.
Yeah. You remember the spot? Yeah. We bought it in 2011, a 2-bedroom condo for $655,000.
Right.
When we sold 2016, so just about 5 years later, we sold it for about 1.2.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, so I could say that's a win, because remember in 2008, you know how things were going in 2008. They couldn't sell is when this thing was built. They couldn't move the units. In fact, we were renting when we first moved in 2009. We rented a 1-bedroom,
right,
and then we bought a 2-bedroom again in 11, so 2 years afterwards. And in fact, they gave us 6 months of rent towards the down payment.
Oh, wow.
On this place.
Wow.
Yeah. That's how desperate they were. In those days, they were that never happened. I was new. I was a new attending. I just started working, so I didn't have a lot of money, at that point, so I was just scraping along, just trying to get there. And I think the down payment at that time was a struggle, So yeah, so that was a blessing, right? Yeah, so that's a win. I'd call that the biggest win.
Biggest regret or mistake?
Oh, biggest mistake. Okay, so we talked about whole life insurance. 2014, 2015. Someone came to the office and talking on something. Oh, you should get your insurance. You have to, which is true, and in some senses, yes, insurance is important, right? It's not an investment though. It's important, like life insurance, disability insurance. right? But this is for protecting your family, right? Protecting your assets. So it's important to have it. Life insurance is cheap, especially when you're young and healthy. So I would advise fellow family in the diaspora, if you don't have it, and you have, especially if you have a family, you have children and wife, you have to get life insurance. It's very, very affordable when you're young and healthy. So that's when you want to get it and have it in place. Life insurance, as well as in my case, disability insurance. I think for everyone it could be important, but for me, disability insurance in terms of your specialty specific, so that if God forbid something happened and I couldn't use my hands, I couldn't give anesthesia, I could still teach and whatnot, and would still, have a salary. But anyway, I digress. So that this guy came in selling stuff. So he's like, yeah, whole life insurance is the way to go. You're putting too much money in your retirement account, so you should do whole life insurance, and you can borrow from it eventually also. So it was quite expensive, and then so but maybe 2 years later I realized no. After putting money into it and reading more, obviously learning more, I said, why am I paying all this money for whole life insurance when life insurance is so cheap? Regular life insurance, term. When I say, I mean like term life insurance.
Right.
So I dumped that advisor, and bought policies for myself. I bought a policy for my wife. God forbid, right? Something happened to my wife, who's going to take care of the kids, right? I mean, had money to be able to have childcare so I can work. So I got us policies, but that was a loss, right? Because, the wasted money and opportunity cost, I can't get that back, but I want to turn my attention back to investing, aggressively. And now I could probably say, like, in terms of just stock investments, I think my portfolio is over $1 million now in my retirement account. Well, I've recovered, thankfully, but it was painful. And also, so obviously, you want to put away for your kids. Obviously, 529. As soon as the kids were born, as soon as we got the Social Security numbers, we started putting money into their 529, because at least taking care of, know that when the time comes, we'll be able to pull from their 529s, and God willing, we'll be able to cover that and not have to be eating tuna fish out of a out of a can, because we can't afford to pay their tuition.
If you could go back and tell your 25-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Wow, 25-year-old Kwame was chilling. I had a lot more hair. I say take care of your hair. Don't put any S curl stuff in your hair. Nothing like the juices and berries,
I
natural and
know.
natural only. Oh man, but but in all seriousness, I would say to not worry about so much about what people think about you. I'll tell a 25-year-old Kwame, like, to really, believe in yourself and stay the course and focus, and don't be distracted by the noise. Not caring what allows you to be free, right? And to really be your full and authentic self, as opposed to having to maintain a particular image or standard. I think that's hard. I think that's something that, no matter how old I get, struggle with that, making sure that I'm, because sometimes I want to I want to give a real piece of my mind, and, but then I think like Chappelle, remember his mother, like, when keeping it real goes wrong. So I don't want to do that either. So there's a balance. There's a balance to all that.
Name one book that changed your thinking.
Well, there's several. I mean, I always loved The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's a great book, powerful book. And I think it talks about, the kind of the universe, and when it's all the universe is conspiring to help you, so whether it be God or the universe or whatever, I think God, is on your side, on my side, throughout everything, so even through the ups and downs, the ultimate goal is for my good. So that's kind of how I think about it, that, all the stuff, and certainly a lot of things that stink and are not so great happen, but the ultimate, the end goal is the same. You just don't see it all. You don't see the bigger picture.
One thing that you think needs to change for Africa to reach its potential.
You have to address a lot of the corruption, unfortunately, in Africa. And it's not easy. It starts at the top, right? And it works its way down, So we talked about how difficult it is to get things done if you don't pay, almost like pay to play. And then can't even like fall to Africa, because it's like it's here in the States. It's just on a different level, right? And maybe it happens. Maybe it's not so forward facing. I think that the resources are there. We're so fortunate. We're so blessed to have all these resources, but unfortunately, they just don't get to the people, right? Because And it's not that there isn't enough to get to everyone. Just greed. So there's few at the top in these positions of authority who have this insatiable desire for stuff, and yeah, but they want all of it. Let the people hold something. Let some of the others have something. No, they can't have it. No, what how is that? And you look at some of the roads and the areas of that we could do so much. It could be so much farther ahead. If there wasn't as much. If everyone had kind of having their hand in the cookie jar and really trying to get their piece. So where there's nothing left for those who are. I can't even say the less poor. I can't even say the poor. The poor just have nothing.
Do you think Africa can ever unite as one country?
Oh, fully. I don't see it. I wish. I think there's just so many cultural differences. Even within country specific, it's very difficult to unite because just so many. And I don't know. And I think that some of that is intentional, right? I think that's how Africa was chopped up when the Europeans, made their exit. They divided us up with lines and culture and different lines which is very difficult to bridge. So I think maybe a few countries can maybe get together. I think Kwame Nkrumah had the vision of Ghana, Guinea, Mali at that time, which was like, so far ahead of his time in that thinking. But I think it would be very challenging to have a united. It would be unstoppable.
I'm amazed how we're not a united country, but everyone seems to bunch us as one country. It's a continent, right? But they bunch Africa as one country. We're all the same, but we speak different languages. We have different cultures, different values, different laws, different. So I'm always amazed at that. That if we're going to be looked at as one country, why not just unite?
I think a lot of the powers from the West would fear that too much,
Right.
And I think we've seen that, in whether it be Gaddafi, or various leaders here who they were just labeled as being crazy and then were taken out. This is from independence to now. They've been kind of essentially sabotaging, any moves to really unite. So yeah, it'd be very difficult unless something very dramatic happens.
So the final thing I want to get into is the bridge. Someone is going to watch this maybe 6 months later or whatever the case may be. They're going to be inspired by your story and want to start their own journey. What's one thing you want to leave on a bridge, right? A resource, a contact, a piece of advice, something that could actually help.
The biggest piece of advice I would like to leave is, especially when you talk about investing, is the biggest investment that you can make in yourself is not having bad debt. So that means, like we talked about investing in the stock market, we talked about investing in returns on your investment. But probably one of the biggest returns you can get is paying off credit card debt.
Yep.
So if you have a credit card that, is charging you 8, 9, nowadays 20%, right? Interest, you leave that's significant amount of money that there's very few investments that are going to give you that kind of return on your investment. So paying those things off and getting out of credit card debt in particular. Yes, mortgage is inevitable. You're going to have a mortgage. That's good debt. Your school loans, even that, I think, in my time, school loans were lower than they are now. But if you have them, it is what it is. That was an investment in yourself, right? But credit card debt is not an investment in yourself. That's you're paying for somebody else's at the companies, their yacht, their super yacht, and all that stuff. That's what you're paying for. So you need to get out of that debt. You need to focus on whatever you need to do to, if you got to balance transfer it and get a good interest rate and get it down. That's the thing you got to do first. Plug the hole in the boat, right? And then you can actually start building wealth.
Kwame, thank you so much. This was incredible.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you for having me.
And for everybody watching, I'll link Kwame's information below. I really appreciate your time, Kwame. Thank you again for showing up on my first interview, my first podcast episode.
Thank you. It's a privilege, man. Privilege to be the first. I'm staying fresh. You look good.
No, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much, man. All the best. All right.
All right, brother. Love you, brother. Send love to my family.
I will.